anybody has any concerns, please do reach out to us. So, without any further ado, I think I'll begin with my first question. And my first question really is to our panelists is to talk about the feminist leadership programs that they are running. And, very often we use the terms feminist or we use the terms feminist leadership loosely, right? What does it really mean to run a feminist leadership program? We'd love to know more about the programs that you run. And I think why do you run these programs, right? What is the hope of impact that you have? So I'll begin with Archana.
Thank you, Sapna. Uh, and I also want to start with thanking ICRW for organizing this important conversation. And I was talking to her yesterday that how a lot of time when we talk about our work, we are generally not thinking from the MLE or ME lens about the leadership work. A lot of time, impact generally is either seen as empowerment or outcomes, achievements. But how do we really look at leadership also from the MNE lens is an important conversation. To begin with, Nirantar is a feminist resource center. And our approach to agency building and empowerment is education. And we believe that agency and empowerment is actually at the core of leadership building. And I mean, if I look at the leadership work of Nirantar, I would look at it in three ways. One which is rooted in the educational interventions in the organization. So we work with young girl and adult women and use feminist pedagogies and feminist knowledge creation for creating critical thinking tools for enabling agency by giving exposure, and we believe that these are the processes which will lead to leadership, because when you have critical thinking tools, when you have agency to negotiate leadership, they women and girls come in the leadership roles. The second strand of our work is when we work with the grassroots collective, which are led by the women from marginalized communities, and building their capacities to not only build their own institutions, but at the same time be there at the grassroots level, take leadership and make their own processes and institutions more democratic, which means investing in the structures of organizations, structures of institutions, and governance systems to make them feminist. So, feminist leadership then is not just an individual journey or an individual thing, but you actually create institutions of feminist leadership. That is the second strand of Nirantar's work. The third strand of Nirantar's work, where we are very invested and we believe, and this is again a very conscious, mindful ways in which we invest in the capacities of the people who are transacting these feminist leadership programs. So developing capacities of karyakartas is a very, very intentional step for us. For us, it is not just a transactional relationship that there is a program and they are delivering. Because I mean, to me, something that stays really with me, that is very true for education. But even if we stretch the imagination of it in the context of leadership, Rabindranath Tagore once said that a lamp which is not lighted, how can it light the other lamp? So, जब तक अगर एक कोई मोमबत्ती जली हुई नहीं है तो वो दूसरी की मोमबत्ती से को भी आप जला नहीं सकते. Now these are our karyakartas who need, they have to first learn the tools of critical thinking, display leadership, understand leadership, exercise leadership, for them to enable women and girls to also exercise leadership. So this is a very important aspect of our work, and even when we say what are the different ways in which we develop leadership, these Karikatas are actually our front runners, and they are also very, very important for us. Third, which is very, very important as a education resource organization, is the investment in the knowledge creation, which actually creates critical engagement with ideas of leadership, agency, and empowerment. As an organization, we believe that unless people who are most impacted by the structures of power have their own voice in the knowledge creation, in the systems which are actually creating those opportunities, we will still be bringing the knowledge of people who have dominated structures in so many other ways will dominate the structures of knowledge also. So that's another way in which Nirantar is sort of believe that the leadership is not only in terms of acting or doing or taking charge of their lives or negotiating, but actually taking lead and creating knowledge and knowledge systems that are rooted in their own lives, and from the standpoint of their own lived realities. So these are the ways in which Nirantar sort of works on the leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Archana, so much for talking about the individual, the systemic, the knowledge, and also about people who run these programs. Thank you. Over to you, Shalini, to share about Kriya's work on feminist leadership, please.
Thanks, Sapna. So, very actually, when Archana was talking, I kept thinking about our work also. So, when you start working on building feminist leadership, you also start thinking about several issues, intersections of gender, sexuality, patriarchy, and then try to understand that in the field, it is not only one issue which is impacting lives of women. There are several issues. So when as an organizations working on women's issue, are we equipped to handle all issues, or are we trying to address all issues, or somewhere at some point we are also leaving some of the issues? So when we started working, so when Kriya started working, actually we did a round of travel to all several Hindi speaking states because we felt that we will be working as a bilingual organization. And so we were comfortable in Hindi. So we started traveling to Hindi speaking organizations and in the Hindi speaking area. And we felt and realized after talking to all these organizations and activists that all of us are working to make changes in women's lives, but lack of resources and lack of opportunities to access many spaces and resources was also creating barriers in building our own leadership and then making changes in the women's lives. So we started working with these women's activists to build their understanding and our understanding also in both ways, because we were bringing something to them and they were sharing a lot of things with us, which was helping us in designing the program. So of course we started engaging with them at the community level first. So we spoke to women led organizations and tried to create a network to build feminist intersectional lens, so which will impact their work at the ground level. So maybe they have been working on the gender issues but not try to address sexuality in their work. So maybe some of the organizations are working on the sexuality and gender both, but have not been able to add angle of religion and caste discrimination in their work. So how to build that holistic comprehensive understanding around violence against women's issue and gender based violence also? So we created a strong network of women led organization, and women led particularly because we felt that these organizations were not able to access resources and spaces to voice their opinion and also to share their experiences. So how to build their leadership and how to also build their organization. So this was our first community level intervention directly with women and women led organization. At the structure level, we felt that when we started working with these organizations, issues around access to justice and rights and spaces where they can formally go and access and voice their opinion again and again started coming up. So it was not that we had built all the programs in starting, but one led to the another according to the need and requirements from the field. So then we started engaging with women leaders, elected women representatives, because all these women led organizations, community workers, they felt that panchayat spaces are the most accessible space for us, nearest and accessible from our own community. Women are and leaders are also from our own community, so they will be able to understand. So why don't we work with them to build their capacities, which will also open spaces for us, formal structural space where we can go and talk about our issues. So then our engagement started with elected women representatives, a feminist leadership program called Meri Panchayat Meri Shakti, which is translates My Panchayat My Strength. And we tried to build capacities of EWS, because all of you know, when first election happened after our constitutional amendment, many women leaders came into the panchayat local governance system, but they were sitting at home and they were not able to take the leadership position. And so their male family members, husband, brother, or sons were taking the decision making power, and they were also handling a lot of extra work related to the panchayat work. So how to build their leadership, but building understanding around also why they are not going, what does it mean when they will go there. So then we started working with them, and these women leaders who were part of the Iqtida network created an enabling environment for these women leadership, because we also have to understand that feminist leaders cannot work in isolation. They need a support system, they need an enabling environment for them also, because they have to face their family members also related to certain norms when they are trying to challenge or um, changing the norms around their mobility and lives. And they have to also face the same patriarchal structure in the panchayat spaces. So it was very important to talk about all these issues with them one by one. So that was the structural level intervention we proposed. And third intervention was with girls, yeah, with young girls, because many women who were again directly engaging, they felt, why are we not starting engaging on these issues with a younger cohort? Because younger population, if they start understanding these issues, it will be a lot easier for them to bring changes in their lives. So then all these three started working together. So self academy, which is focused on building leadership of young girls, we started organizing. I think we have been doing for last 20 years, 2000, no, around 15 years. And all these girls come for the 10 days, 15 days academy, where they learn about livelihood skills, they learn about language, English, Hindi language, they learn about digital literacy, computer and mobile and smartphones, but they also learn about everyday issues which they encounter in their life. So whether it is safe access to public space, whether it is talking to ANM and ASHA workers about iron tablets and contraceptives and SRHR issues, or also talking about why in our local panchayat we are not able to go, why it is not accessible for us, why they are only talking about agriculture or electricity or construction, but not about violence against women's issue, not talking about child marriage issues. So how can we interact? And that's how we started organizing also interface meetings between elected women representatives, male representatives, and these girls, which also create like help the breaking the barrier and started the conversation around these issues. These girls have actually advocated for opening the local toilets which were built for women and girls, but it was shut, nobody was using, and administration was also not paying attention. So they organized a conversation with ASHA workers and ANMs, especially to talk about their health issues. So that's how these processes started, and we kept building on the experiences. And while working with all these three communities, three structural levels, we realized that all these women and girls are also very interested in reading and writing, and they are continuously talking about how these information related to these topics are not accessible. And of course, Nirantar has been doing, many other organizations have been doing and creating resources in Hindi, and our experiences also pushed us to talk about more on these issues in local language, in accessible Hindi language. So we started creating resource materials around sexuality, gender in Hindi and on feminist leadership, and created a space for campaigns and public events where these girls were trying to attract larger community from their villages and from their districts to one place and to talk about their issues. So violence against women's issue, safe access to public space, where they can go, how they can go, what are the challenges they are facing, including also going to a school for education, and what are the barriers and challenges they are facing. So that's how at all these three levels we are trying to integrate feminist leadership concept while working with these three different communities. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shalini. It's so interesting that Archana mentioned organizations, you mentioned organizations, then young girls, right? And adolescent girls, and then also this whole thing around knowledge creation, right? Creating resources. And then you're also working with elected women representatives and you're building feminist leadership amongst them. Both have really set the foundation for me to ask my second question, which I'll come to after Birja speaks around how do you really measure work at these levels? So we'll come to that. Birja, over to you. Do you want to talk about your work on feminist leadership and what has it meant, what issues you've been covering?
Yeah, thank you, Sapna, for inviting me to this panel. Uh, uh, I have been part of a feminist leadership program as a participant, as a young person, which was run by Gender at Work a few years ago. And then eventually I have also joined ICRW to design the curriculum and the entire architecture of a feminist leadership building program called Chingaari. So I'll briefly talk about Chingaari and what I have done. But in my experience as a facilitator, also have engaged with different groups, whether it is young girls or boys or adolescent adolescent groups or women's group, where as a gender trainer, whenever you were speaking about gender, power, patriarchy, you were not necessarily speaking about feminist leadership, but I do feel that those spaces sort of add to somehow add to some sort of a opening up of a thinking, which is, I think, like Archana and Shalini mentioned, is a very core part of feminist leadership building. But I'll now focus on Chingaari. So, as in Chingaari, in emerged as a research that ICRW did uh, in 2024. The research is called breaking through the from barriers to breakthrough, in which was a research that ICRW conducted and found out that in many Indian healthcare organizations, especially in community-based organizations and community-based organizations, women are not occupying a lot of leadership position. However, they are mostly concentrated uh, in the in the level of mobilization. So what gave birth to address that challenge was Chingaari, which was I would say a behavioral change program. Most likely as a facilitator, I would say that we were trying to work with these women, to have conversations with them, to understand what are their problems, and also in the process figure out that how we can probably make a change. And like Archana and Shalini said, that we also thought that recognition of the problem was part of our the way we wanted to uh, sort of intervene in terms of building leadership. We wanted these women to recognize that what are the problems, not to say that they didn't already recognize, but sort of put it in a framework of structural inequality of gender, uh, class, caste, language, etc., etc., which plays a lot of role in how women how women's journey inside their own organizations are shaped. Uh, so in our work, we sort of talked with them about various issues that they face, various issues, various kind of joys that they experience, whatever their experience has been throughout 12 sessions over a period of 6 months. And we had women from 25 organizations and from around 12 to 15 states in India. And all of these women, we sort of started with a offline session, and then we went on to do multiple online sessions, fortnightly online sessions with them. So that's the program. But Sapna asked that, well, how would I understand feminist leadership? I think uh, uh, I remember I would like to quote this Paulo Freire. As if you don't know, he's a pedagogy. He's a scholar of pedagogy. He talks about pedagogy of oppressed, and he says that uh, to recognize oneself is to know one's own social history. So I think for me, leadership would start if we actually know that in the society or in the social processes where we lie, who are we as a person, not just as an individual with multiple identities, but in the society, where do we stand? What shapes us? What kind of, in the hierarchy, where do I stand? Like, if there is a hierarchy of caste, which is very common in India, and if, as my surname suggests, I am a Brahman, then where do I stand? And that sort of recognition through knowledge is what defines our journey into leadership. Like, it would mean that for me also, leadership is an act. It's always a verb that we act. So to first act, to recognize social inequities, and then to sort of act against it, in individually, in collectively, in individual ways or in collective ways, in whatever ways possible. What is possible through this program is a question for the rest of the panel, for the rest of the time, that what is possible, how do we measure what is possible, all of that we'll have. But that's how I would like to define that feminist leadership is a process of building a space, or building capacity, or building knowledge to act against inequities. That's how I would like to define, and this is a limited understanding that I'm bringing from my experience of work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Birja. I think you've brought it all very together by just saying that, it's an act of acting against inequities, knowing your own position and then deciding how do you bring it up as a leader? What do you do about that in your work and in your life? So thank you so much. Shruti, would you like to add anything to what Beja has just said, and also your experience in terms of what feminist leadership has meant to you, please?
I think Bijay really gave a good overview of how we kind of thought about feminist leadership in the Chingaari program, and also kind of defined a lot of this. And it also brought together what Archana and Shalini said about feminist leadership. And that really went into, as both from a M&E research lens, but also from a programmatic lens for our Chingaari program. How did we kind of ground it in certain values and principles that actually then framed how we did the sessions, what kind of indicators we built, what kind of research methods and tools we built, right? So centering a lot of this, and I think even Archana really said about these alternative forms of knowledge systems, centering the voices of our participants and their experiences, and then thinking about how does that link to critical thinking, how does that link to perceptions and knowledge change. So that I think is something that was very, very critical for our understanding of building the program, as well as kind of designing the M&E frameworks and the research tools. And the other thing which definitely that Bijja said and also was echoed by Archana and Shalini is thinking about structural change, right? This cannot be individual journey. This cannot be an individual burden, because this has also very profound impacts on our participants' lives, right? It shows up in a lot of um, poor mental health, poor emotional well-being, physical well-being, right? And so it is very, very important to kind of think about the structural conditions within which they lie. Um, and this was kind of very defining to the Chingaari program of how we how we thought about feminist leadership building, that it cannot be an individual journey, but needs to be framed within these structural conditions that they work with, and also build those solidarity networks when we talk about our Chingaari program and the cohorts and how they interact with each other and build from each other, learn from each other. So, yeah, so I think that would be my addition to what Bicha and everyone else said.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shruti. So I think, we've set a good context in terms of what feminist leadership building really entails, right? It entails talking about our own positionality, our participants' own positionality, their identities. It entails talking about their personal lives, working with them, figuring out negotiations within their personal lives, in the structural spaces like their household, their community, the panchayat where they work in, the caste systems that they are part of. And it also is an act of knowledge creation, right? Who produces knowledge, what kind of knowledge, and who's using it? So all of this comes in. So the question that we are attempting to answer is, when we are working, when we are doing this work, how do we really measure it? How do we measure whether people have started thinking about their identities? How do we measure what they are taking back to their organizations? Um, and what are they doing with this knowledge in their lives, in their surroundings, right? So I will break that question, but please take your time. And if you want to cover the whole thing together, please feel free to do that. But my question to all of you really is, some of you here, Archana, Shalini, you've been in the space for such a long time. What has impact looked like? First, we'd like to know what has impact really looked like, right, over 20 years. And secondly, how have you really captured that impact, those nuances, and going, how qualitative researchers or people like us who do this work are often said that, this is very anecdotal. So how do you go beyond that to capture the impact? I'd love to hear more from you. So Archana, over to you, please.
Thank you. It's a alphabetical disadvantage, like A. Um, Very interesting question, and I'm continuously thinking uh, that can impact or social change be really measured? And even when we say we have measured the impact, what have we really measured? Uh, so a lot of time, and if I speak from Nirantar's point of view, since we run educational programs for young girls and women, we have very concrete indicators, measurement tools when it comes to learning achievements, where they were, where they have reached. So this is something very clear and very easy to track also. But when it comes to agency, when it comes to empowerment, when it comes to leadership, I think a lot of us always talk about that this is not something which can be tangibly captured in women's lives, particularly when they are from marginalized communities, because they are navigating multiple layers of subjugation and voicelessness. So no matter what kind of tools we create, we uh, how do we understand each and every person and her positionality, like Birja was saying? My standpoint, my position in the social structure is not just to sum of the layers that I am, under. So this intersectionality as a unique experience, how can we capture? I think that is the real challenge when it comes to MNE, especially in the context of leadership. Um, I think the second thing that we are really not able to capture, and is a big challenge, is the zigzag way in which leadership happens in people's lives. because to imagine that just because I have developed certain kind of tools, I also have a critical thinking. Sometimes I also know what needs to be done, but do I want to do? Maybe sometime I'll decide to act, sometimes I will not decide to act, and factors could be any. है ना, even when we are like traveling in a metro and you see something, someday you just are so motivated to intervene, someday you're just not. So but if MNE had happened at the moment when you are not in that position to act, then something else is captured, because MNE happens in a moment. MNE is not something which is continuous, which is all the time kind of tracking people's life and their decisions, because you're doing it in different points of time. And that is why I think it is important to understand that leadership is a very zigzag kind of a journey that people have. And MNE is not following that zigzag road for us to really understand how people are navigating their life and the leadership. Um, Thirdly, I feel that we are not engaging enough with the challenges of acting as part of the leadership role. And I really love the way Mary John puts it, that it is too much of a romanticization of agency and leadership, especially in the context of young people, that the moment they have leadership and agency, they will act on it. To have an agency, to have capacity, to have certain kind of leadership skill is one thing, but to act upon them is something very different. And the kind of structure within which women and young people are operating, and again, and it is not just the young people, young person, again, what is his or their location, how much they have support, what kind of environment ecosystem they are operating upon. And again, I think the MNE of leadership fails to get this context right, because if measuring is based on the action, our ability to act, our ability to negotiate, then are we also able to capture the context in which my ability to act is being assessed or judged. So and the fourth challenge, which I feel is very important for us to be mindful when are thinking of the MNE, is lack of time. And this actually goes beyond MNE, and I want to give example about this. For example, Nirantar was part of developing Khabar Lehriya, the rural women journalism journalist, and that started in 2020, and it took 15 years for Khabar Lehriya to become an independent, autonomous, rural women's journalistic this thing. But does MNE has patience for 15 years? If MNE was done just after 3 years or 5 years, it might have seemed like a failed attempt, because fifth year we were just struggling to make women learn how to print even the newsletter. And it was such an small soft skill that women needed to do certain things. So I think this is again a thing that when we think of MNE, we have the idea or the imagination of MNE starting with the project, ending with the project. But leadership journeys are much, much longer than the project lives of funded this thing. So I think this is the challenge of a development sector. It is not just one thing, this thing, that journeys are so long, but MNEs are not kind of, go along the journeys of people that are in that process. And can I just quickly add one more thing?
Go ahead,
There are a
go
lot
ahead.
of time MNE is so focused on outcomes. What we forget to do MNE is the process.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Archana, for I think bringing it together very beautifully in that one line that you said about how leadership is doesn't start and stop, but M&E often has a start point and a stop point. Thank you for sort of framing it like that. Really appreciate it. Shalini, over to you. Your thoughts on measuring some of the work that you guys have been doing at Kriya for almost 20 years. And how does one really measure the impact of feminist leadership programs?
Thanks, Sapna, and thanks, Archana. Very interesting sharing. And for some of the things, of course, I was able to relate to some of the confusion, conflicts we face while creating a M&E framework for our program. So in Kriya, actually, we always say that we want to see the change in attitude, because once the attitude change and thinking change, it will also show in your action. But then how to build those connections? There has been some shift in your thinking and attitude, and that's why you are doing this, taking this action. It has always been very challenging, especially while talking to other people, what this program has done. So many times when I am visiting to the field, when I am meeting these women, I can take notes of like several changes, but explaining those shifts and changes to other people becomes very challenging, because the way you said, Sapna, the language of monitoring and evaluation, this was the indicator and we have been able to justify. Okay. And so when you, very useful question, when we start like creating M&E process and framework, then we have to think that what kind of change we are really trying to create. And so when we are talking about feminist leadership, we are talking about building confidence, we are talking about agency, we are talking about also shifting power dynamics, especially with EWRs when we are working with women, when we are working. And I still remember when you are looking at some of these questions you have raised in the chat box also, I was thinking actually when we develop these programs, what do we want to measure and how do we want to measure? Because it's also not an isolation, because sometimes you are thinking about attitudes, sometimes you are thinking about environment, sometimes you are thinking about rationale. So what do we measure? And because feminist leadership is not a one day shift, the way Archana was sharing, you cannot practice this in isolation, and there are many different intersections. So at the time of starting the program, how was the environment? After 5 years, how environment has changed? Sometimes funding and timeline has not changed at all, but your environment has shifted to 360-degree. So then how do you justify your program and indicate, how do you match your indicators? Many times when we work at instructor levels, when women are trying to change some of the norms and taking decision or leadership position in their community, they have to face challenges from their family in their work space also. So then you are talking to their families also, if they are married, you are talking to their husbands also, you are talking to their in-laws also. Are we also going to measure the shift in their family members' attitude? Then you are also talking to elected male representatives, because many times elected male representatives are creating challenge for EWRs. So then you need to intervene there also and work with them also. Then are you also going to measure the impact of your program in relation to their attitudinalship? So all these different elements have to be there part of your program. So you also want to measure all these different elements, and so you cannot actually decide any one tool. So storytelling, outcome have different names. Of course, we have given to the M&E framework and M&E framing the indicators, but there are multiple things, and it is very difficult to use any one kind of M&E framework for measuring the impact of your program. And that is why I am saying we have used many different methods to challenge and also apply different lens to see the impact. So for example, I can say when we were doing after 3 years assessment for EWR's program, I still remember one of the husbands said that क्रिया ने कुछ सिखाया या नहीं, हमें खाना बनाना सिखा दिया. Because when we were starting this program, one of the EWR said very clearly that it is very easy for you to call us for the training. But the moment we get the information for training and we have to participate, we start building like ideas where and how I have to negotiate. I have to negotiate with my husband. I have to negotiate with my mother-in-law. I have to negotiate with my different my sister-in-laws, and then only I can say yes or no for coming to this training. So because these people are part of our immediate surroundings, if I am not working with them, I will not be able to work with them. So I have to create measuring impact framework or indicators for for her family members also. One of the women who was traveling for the first time, and by chance she missed her train at the local railway station. So it was very stressful situation for her. Somehow she managed to get into the train and she negotiated with ticket collector that you take the fine but allow me to travel for these number of stations. And for any external person to explain that how this has worked for her in building her confidence, because it was her first travel all alone, and then still she manages to negotiate with the ticket collector about her travel. I think I was able to see the huge shift. The way she was talking in villages that I will not be able to come, Didi, for this training because my family will not allow. And now taking this step, but sometimes it becomes very challenging, and people are not convinced enough or not ready to see this as a big shift. So it also depends on the context, the way Archana said, which location. So where are you working? The women who are coming from different locations. So you cannot also create one tool for everyone, because in one state also there will be many diverse location, diverse identity and diverse issues. So women who are facing challenges due to caste and religion, in during COVID also we said, we realized how elected women representatives were trying to apply their intersectional lens, and they were able to notice how women are facing different kind of discrimination due to their caste and religion. So their discrimination is also very different. Then how can you identify only one tool to measure the impact? So these are some of the confusion and conflicts when we start working on feminist leadership. There is not one issue and one point where we can just figure it out that this is how we should measure. And the long term impact is really important to see. Sometimes we feel that after 3 months, while talking to them, we will be able to see how they have applied. But no, it is not enough. Sometimes it can take 6 months. Sometimes it can take more than 1 year also. So time frame is also very important, which is also sometimes very challenging. We are not ready to invest in the long term processes of measuring the impact. Yeah, I can later add more, but right now
Yeah.
this is.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shalini. You know, something you said around storytelling, and I think you were mentioning outcome harvesting. I think it's important to think about how we enter programs like this. Like you said, do we enter it that, we'll do this for 6 months, and at the end of 6 months, the lives of these participants and our facilitators and everyone will change? Or do we actually see what happens at the end of 6 months and then look back and see, what did we do? Right. So that is something very important to think about. Thank you. Thank you, Shalini. Before I go to Virja, I'd actually like to go to Shruti. Shruti, would you like to share a little bit about, the kind of outcomes that you've observed, because you sort of led the whole M&E component of Chingaari. So what was the impact really, and how can we really convince people that, look, these programs are so powerful?
So before I actually go to kind of speaking the about the impact, maybe it'll be little to take a step back and useful to kind of think about how we even thought about our M&E framework, knowing kind of, all of these challenges that we have to grapple with when it comes to capturing this impact and change, especially when it comes to women from so many different contexts. Like Bidja said, we had women from 15, 16 states, all coming from very kind of different constraints that they work around, the different type of work they're doing. Also, we had women from across age groups as well, different types of religious caste, positionalities. Um, so some of what we grappled with, and then how did we try to maybe counter it, and then I can quickly go to the impact as well. So I think one thing which a lot of kind of gender programming M&E frameworks does talk about, but is actually very difficult to translate to practice, is also building these like contextual indicators which really capture the lives of our participants and the work, the places that they work and live in. And I think I want to build on something that also Niharika said in the chat, right? Sometimes when we talk about these indicators, we invariably kind of capture a lot of the visible aspects of change without realizing kind of what underpins a lot of this, the intangibles that underpin it. So for example, a lot of like the feminist literature talks about one way of measuring empowerment can be to look at women's mobilities, right? Can they go out of the house without male permission, without male supervision? How far can they go? And something that was very unique to our participants then was, as women healthcare workers working at the grassroots level, something that was very integral to their professional lives was actually having this mobility. So they actually had to, as ASHA workers, ANMs, they had to go to people's houses, do checkups. Some of them assisted victims of domestic violence, so they had to kind of take them to the police station, to the family courts. Some of them obviously like took pregnant women or adolescent girls to clinics close to their house or to the hospital, which was maybe 1 or 2 districts away. And so mobility was a very big part of kind of their everyday lived experiences. But if we just looked at it from that lens, we would think that our participants really, for lack of a better word, maybe scored very high on the empowerment scale. But when we dug later, into it a lot more, what we realized was that a lot of this visible empowerment actually came with backlash, with disempowerment for them, right? Because their mobility was actually layered with a lot of stigma. So, to give you an example, one of our younger participants told us that she was engaged to one person, and when they found out about kind of the work that she does, her family had to hear कि आपकी लड़की पता नहीं कहाँ जाती है, क्या क्या काम, कैसा काम करती है, लेट घर आती है तो पता नहीं किससे बात करती है, कम्युनिटी में जाती है. Another woman spoke about how, she would get all of these rishtas, people would come home, and when they would find out about the work that she was doing, suddenly they would not hear back from them, right? So a lot of this visible empowerment came with this equal kind of backlash, disempowerment for a lot of our participants. And so we had to build a lot of these contextual indicators which really captured the textures of their everyday lives. The second thing, the way I think in which we did this was have these very data collection tools and methods. So for the quantitative side, we had the pre and post test to kind of look at this critical thinking, knowledge shift, perception shifts, along with feedback forms. But we also complemented this with IDIs before our program, at the end of our program, and we did this thing called what we call reflection workshops, which were focus group discussions at regular intervals during our programming. And I know Archana said that it was easy for them to kind of track some of these knowledge shifts, but actually when it came to our programming and we tried to capture gender transformative leadership, we realized that for a lot of them, when we looked at from a pre-post test way, we saw that overall, yeah, the cohort showed learning when it came to what are gender transformative principles. But when we dug deeper, we saw a subset of like the participants having kind of a regressive understanding of what gender transformative leadership can be. And then we went back to kind of our IDIs, we went back to reflection workshops, to our program recordings, and we realized when it actually comes um, to application of some of these principles, they were all actually doing a lot of this work in their daily lives, right? They were, for example, a lot of our participants came with the savior complex because as healthcare workers, and we saw this slow dismantling over the process. Again, not a complete kind of dismantling, but it was a process that we did see They were people who were in leadership positions, were thinking about how decision making can be made more participatory in their organizations, things like those. But this wasn't captured at all in our pre and post tests and feedback forms. So it was also building a lot of these varied data collection tools which spoke to each other and built on each other. So I think that was very, very kind of important to the Chingaari program. Given all of this, I think coming to what is the impact I was seeing, and again, as Archana and Shalini said, um, it was so uneven across our participants, and it just could not also be a uniform kind of understanding of impact and change because they all came from different resource capacity patriarchal constraints, each having different starting points. The process of it was very different for each of them depending on their individual context, and the way that we looked at it maybe to capture these different kind of movements that happen. And again, this is not at all a linear movement, but these are just kind of experiences that they have out of or change that they experience. Was we classified this as a lot of kind of realization, which is this knowledge shift that we were seeing about what are the structures around them, how does that impact their aspirations, the work that they do, the kind of decisions that they do. For a lot of them, it was a realization about social gender socialization, the kind of choices they have made till now. So that was one aspect of it. The second one was kind of reaction to this, and I think Shalini maybe spoke about it, right? About how do you negotiate with the structures around you? How do you talk to your mother-in-law or your husband and say, ki, I'm going for this 2-day workshop, and now it's on you, right? And so that is also something. And we also heard from one of them saying ki my mother-in-law joked and said, "Pata nahi what you've learned in this training, but at least mera son sudhar gaya hai." Right? So this was also like a negotiation that they did, and again with the different structures, right? That captured the different structures in their institution, in their home, in their community that they worked with. And then finally, one way in which we looked at the impact was action. Some individuals took action within their home, some took action within their organizations because they had a lot more power. Some of them did it in the community by organizing community events, awareness workshops, speaking with the women in the community. So again, change looked very differently. It looked very different at different moments of time. So each of our participants, because we interacted with them throughout those 6 months, um, but also it was very uneven and it's not a linear process. And I think just acknowledging and recognizing that was something that was integral to the Chingaari program.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shruti, for talking about a little bit of, ways that we tried to capture some of this non-linear processes. And I think um, you also touched upon, why such work continues to be important because, even though you don't have a end point as such, but what does it leave participants and teams behind with? So thank you so much for sharing that. Birja, over to you. And, especially Birja, as a facilitator, uh, what are your thoughts around, the changes that you see, which may not be able to, get captured or measured? And you have 5 minutes, Birja.
Yeah, maybe I would take 1 or 2 minutes extra, Sapna, because I have thoughts about many things that I have listened to so far. Uh, uh, I I would probably bring out a discomfort. I mean, I think we have so far spoken about the intangibility, the impossibility of measuring intangible changes that happen, the catharsis that we experience during these programs in the training space, outside of it. And I think that's all true. As a facilitator, I can testify to that I have embodied experience of those catharsis that happens within a training space, or in general through a program of which capacity building or building spaces are a very integral part. But I would take us to a very fundamental question, that we sometimes it's very important because primarily in Indian context, feminist leadership building programs are oftentimes it lies at an intersection of behavioral change, attitudinal change, capacity building and knowledge building, and then sort of finding some sort of a space to execute all of this, like our changed attitude, the new knowledge, and the kind of pedagogy that we are equipped with, new tools to sort of take it and apply it somewhere, maybe in form of negotiations, maybe in form of running on one's own program, whatever we gain. And it's but the programs are lies at a mix of all of these. It's not a completely learning model where we can just run a test to sort of identify what are the outcomes, how whatever we have communicated has the, if we are prodding our participants to think, is the thought process actually translating into their everyday life? We have no way, because it's not a school program. We cannot run an examination. It's not completely a behavioral change experiment, so we cannot run psychological experiment trials, sort of anything to measure it. Similarly, a lot of programs are also funding bound, and they are related to what impacts we commit, what we commit to a funder, or what a funder really expects and visualizes as a outcome. So we cannot completely also measure it, because the reporting models are sort of, again, very much what suits us or those who run the program, or suits the funder. What's the narrative, what is the discourse, and what is the buzz in the sector, if I may use the word. So, but we cannot completely measure it. So we have to also, so sometimes we also forget to ask ourselves that what is the change that we want to see, and what is that we, and that informs the question that what is that we want to measure. And like Shruti said, we have in Chingaari tried to ask that question, because I also feel in Chingaari, we were not just working with women, we were working with women workers. I have to emphasize this again and again, that what would leadership change, what would a feminist leadership transformation actually mean for a women worker who works, who's a mobilizer, but at the same time, she's a woman, but she's also a worker. For her, it would mean salary. For her, it would mean more time. For her, it would mean more work-life balance. And is our pedagogy reflecting those reality? Is not just reflecting, but is it also sort of translating into a situation where they can actually access these things? More salary, more time for them, more mobility, more space. And I think these questions have informed how we have thought of our, as a facilitator, I would think about our pedagogy. And I think the resource book that we have worked in Chingaari have not been out yet, but I would like all of you to sort of wait for it, and when it's out in the website, read it. We have really tried to scope that. It's a difficult question, because ultimately at some point within also our program, we were conflicted that what are they going to gain out of this? If you're calling this as a leadership program, leadership transformation, what would be the afterlife of this transformation? I mean, and then we have tried to sort of include, are they going to sort of apply, like if you're going to say that caste is a running thread in all the workplaces, they are not, they are being discriminated on the basis of their merit, that somebody is more meritorious over uh, a field worker is considered less meritorious over somebody who's producing a knowledge and sort of interacting with the funder. How do we break it? What will give them that tool to sort of break that? Can they really speak in a language? Can they have a language as a tool to sort of cross that barrier? Can they really use a survey to sort of address those questions? So I think these kind of thinking we tried to do, because we sort of were very we were kind of how to say, it was a sort of dysphoria between the facilitator, when you are as a facilitator, and what are the realities of our participant. And it was on our faces constantly in all the sessions. And like I said, sometimes we think of women as a homogeneous category, and we sort of forget that they are workers. They are really using their body to work. And when we put center work as a central theme, then it becomes very easy to bring caste, see patriarchy, see religion, see purity and impurity that runs through our workplaces. So I'll just give one example. Also, another thing I would like to mention is that in our, that's how we have then, so I feel it's very important then again to ask, what do we want to measure? What is the outcome that we want to see? I mean, I understand that some of the changes, the emotional learning that happens in a space cannot be measured, but I also would like to emphasize that it's also important to ask ourselves that, what is that our participant going to gain? What is that it's going to be the impact of this pedagogy? And I think we have asked and we have had debates. Do they want skill? Is critical thinking a skill? If critical thinking is a skill which comes through our pedagogy, when we talk about power, patriarchy, gender, caste, etc., how are they going to use this critical thinking? It's important to sometimes think about these questions, because I also feel ultimately these women join these leadership programs giving the time. They, like Shalini was mentioning, it's really, really hard for women in this country to take out time. They all live in time poverty. And towards the end, I would like to also emphasize that, sometimes it's difficult to measure. We sort of run away from this question, or we sort of, I would not say run away, that would be that would not be the correct word. I would say we do not use enough creativity, both in the parts of the people who do execute the program, and in the part of the funder, to think about this question that, the communities, the women that belong to these communities that we work with, are they homogeneous? Probably not. uh, uh, are they are all marginalized, but does that make them all victims? No. And can we really, really think about a way in which it is not going to be the individual burden? They're going to gain something where it is not their individual burden to apply. Maybe, like I was saying, a tool, a language, anything that they can apply, that could really dent the structure, not just like their individual burden to sort of fight with their own husband, fight with their own boss, but per se something that across workplaces, because these women also keep changing workplaces. This is a very informal workspace, so that they could use to sort of gain mobility, both within the workplace, both in their personal life. So that visualization is very important. And like Sapna and Shruti both are aware how many meetings we have had to sort of scope this, have this question. And I would say, please go through our resource book and curriculum when it is out, to see that how we have tried to scope that, what our pedagogy stands for. And in the end, I would like to say that this is not an issue. It's not necessary. This question of impact shouldn't be an issue based question. Rather, it should be a value based question, because I think what values, because then that becomes very easy, that then how is this value translating into their life? That's a way we could take. Simple example, are we, in our pedagogy, we try to say that, we want to challenge. Like I said, we want to act. Eventually, we want to act, not within not within the limitation of Chingaari program. 6 months, it's not possible for various reasons. But to to but eventually, the goal is to act, or probably the goal is to think. Breaking it down into these simple things allows us to measure in some form. However, again, I would like to echo what Sapna and Shalini said, that, but truly, can we really measure what we feel when 50 women from different worlds bring their life experiences, sit in silence, and over the period of time, some of them who have been extremely silent in the first session start speaking, and speak with so much passion? Can we truly measure that? We cannot. But does that make us, does that mean that we shouldn't use our creativity to measure what we are doing? I would say no, because measuring us also gives us a weapon to sort of pitch ourselves more to the funders who are sort of now running away from funding these kind of programs. That's where I will end. Thank you for giving me this space to talk.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Birja. I know we only have last 15 minutes and we have some questions, but I would like to, because the theme of Glocal this year is AI, I would like to check in with the panelists if you want to speak to this, everything that we've spoken about. Do you want to bring in anything about AI in relation to, measuring, or you think that we should just avoid it?
I just have one sentence to say, that the kind of women that we worked with, one, I would say that, we live in India, and the digital penetration, like, I mean, half of the women that we as an organization, and Archana and Shalini and Shruti, all, and Sapna, all of you can also attest to it, that, digital penetration has not happened. I mean, we work with them. Of course, Chat GPT is not just AI. Chat GPT might have entered our phone, but like the way AI and the whole entire discourse is changing, I don't think we as a world, or we as a society have managed to catch up with it. It is definitely shaping our lives, but have we managed to managed the communities that we work with, or even us? I can speak for myself that I have not managed to catch up with whatever is the digital transformation that is happening. So probably to think about integrating AI into our pedagogy and then to our impact, probably organizations, which organizationally we could think about it, but at a program level, and as a person who designs programs, to think about it, maybe we could use it as a tool to facilitate, or tool to sort of use in the pedagogy, but we have not reached there. It would be a stretch to sort of think of it that way, because then it would require all women to have phone. It would rest on the assumption that all women have phone. They know, they could figure out the usage of AI, and they could keep up with the discourse. However, I would also like to give an example that we face one AI challenge whenever we try to measure our whatever the sort of like classroom learning model in which we try to measure our participants. They have used AI to really submit the kind of testing we wanted to do to sort of get that, to understand that whether they are understanding what we are saying or not. They have used AI. That is how the AI is penetrating. That's one thing I would like to say. Rest, people, those who are embedded in more kind of organizational structures, they can see that how they are seeing use of AI. Thank you.
So can I share something?
Yes, yes,
So
please.
actually, till now, when you said this question, I suddenly started thinking, and of course, as Birja said, Chat GPT, those kind of things, Canva, we have started using, but never till now. Actually, I am talking about my, and in my organization also, we have not discussed much around AI. But it is also very important to see that we will not be able to continue completely avoid AI. So maybe in near future we will be in that situation and position then that will push us or force us to use some amount of AI in our work. But I also feel that the kind of work we do, the lot of individual transformation, cross movement, because for feminist leadership we also work with different movements, so collaboration. So those kind of collaboration and coalition kind of work, I think it is very difficult to, right now, I can imagine it's very difficult to use AI. What AI can help us in maybe some of the reflections, meeting notes, the interviews we do, the stories we develop, analysis can be done by AI. We can take help, but still I feel right now it is very limited. It's very limited. We have not used, but and I am not able to think also in apart from these certain situation, specific situation. Yeah.
Can I
Yes,
quickly
please, Archana, please.
um I feel maybe a little contrary to Shalini what you are saying. One, though, I definitely feel that AI needs to be replaced by the RI, real intelligence. And I think feminists have a role to play here, that we continuously push back in terms of whose intelligence is considered knowledge. And I think we are in the same space again. I mean, we did feminist knowledge creation has a long history, and we are again at the same juncture where certain kind of knowledge is taking precedence over people's knowledge and knowledge of the marginalized. And the second thing that I'm thinking is that AI is good, like Shalini is saying, AI is good in taking notes. AI is good in taking this thing. And I feel a good M&E is where we are able to capture the process, because outcome is a uncertain thing. We can never be sure about what an outcome of a certain process would be. So the pedagogy, the process, the tool, they need to be feminist, And that process AI can help us capture, but the analysis has to be ours. The reflection has to be ours. It can only give us data, but we do not allow AI to do analysis for us and tell us what needs to take out of this data. So I think AI needs to be used in this kind of a clever way, but like Shalini said, it is here to stay. We have to learn that, how to use it in a best way without compromising on our values and our principles of feminist knowledge and leadership.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Archana and Shalini and Birja, to talking about the AI thing. I just want to add, anyways, measuring feminist leadership is so complicated. It's so difficult to convince people to invest in this. If we start using AI to measure feminist leadership, then the soul of this work, the stories that we are bringing, the nuances may get lost. So we have to be a little careful. We only have 5 to 7 minutes, and I want to give everyone a chance to have a last word. But there are some questions, and these questions roughly are around two, three categories. One is, when Shalini, this one is for you. When you're working with women panchayat leaders, how do you sort of ensure that the work that you do with them goes beyond the program, right? And you spoke a little bit about how some of it is difficult to capture, but if you could speak to that. And then I think the next couple of questions are, I think another very important question is around how does individual change, how does it really manifest in system change, if at all? And finally, the last one is, look, a lot of these feminist leadership programs that we run are with rural women or in rural spaces, right? Is there something to say about urban spaces? So I'll please feel free, whoever wants to answer, but I will come to Shalini for the panchayat question and then open to Archana, Virja, Shruti to come in on the urban spaces and the system change question, please. Go ahead, Shalini.
Okay, so for the panchayat, of course, we have faced this challenge. So one of the thing what we have found useful is the creating that women-led network of women-led organizations. So these organizations are placed in the same region, same locality, and so they are continuously working with these panchayat leaders. So creating a support structure for them. So for example, when I'm talking about women's led organization, they are also working as a women's collective. There are SHG groups, so we are also engaging with them. So it's not that EWRs, elected women representatives, are working or engaging on these issues all alone. It was very important for us initially. Actually, in very starting, we realized that they need a support structure in their villages, in their districts, and that's how these women activists play a very active role in working with EWRs continuously. So whether Kriya is there or not, whether external organizations are there or not to support them or to work with them, these women-led organizations, their self-help groups, women collectives are always there to work with each other and provide support to each other. And that is how in some of the areas where after 6 years of intervention we have taken an exit, these networks have continued working with EWRs, and some of the EWRs have also fought election for their second term, third term, without any external support in with these women-led organizations only. So that is how we have right now uh, started engagement and building the leadership.
Thank you. Thank you, Shalini. I think you, in a way, also covered the systems change bit, Shalini. Any reflections on the urban spaces bit? Archana, I know that, Nirantar works with groups of urban women and you run different courses and even Kriya for that matter. So any thoughts on that? Any major difference in terms of this whole context?
I think when she said urban, she didn't mean, I mean, the kind of urban poor communities where we are working. Uh, uh, correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, what she meant is there is a way in which feminist leadership is understood by a certain class, which is urban, class, etc. And then we take those ideas to different communities, especially rural, and how those ideas kind of am I right? You can show a thumbs up if you're still there. That's how I read the question, in case it is not right. And I would say yes and no both. One, of course, whenever we are going and working in the community, we also have certain ideas, and we want to take those ideas and experiment and see how they work. But I think the here is the limitation that if we do not engage with communities with whom we are going to work with our ideas enough. So the problem is if we just take the idea and implement them blindly, but if we take the idea, create spaces where there can be an engagement with ideas, what they are thinking, what we are thinking, and there can be a creative tension also. Communities with whom we are working may not agree with our ideas, but is there space to contest, to debate, to come up with collective decisions that where and how we want to move ahead. And I think that also even applies to MNE. That a lot of time interventions we still discuss with communities, but MNE is always the intervention organization's prerogative. But can that also be discussed and challenged by the community and said that, this is not the way we understand leadership? Will you include their ways of looking at leadership and agency and look at MNE? So yes, I mean, it has to be an engaged and co-created, co-discussed things, as per my understanding.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Since we have 2 minutes, I'll give each one of you half a minute for any thought that you want to share. I think I really, we've spoken about how challenging it is to measure this work, and we've also spoken about how important it is to still do this work. So if you want to end on a note of hope and, why we need to continue doing this work. Go ahead,
Go
Vidya.
ahead. I mean, like Ambedkar says that, education is not just for us to feel educated, but it's a tool for social change. And whether measurable or not measurable, I mean, of course, we are in a platform which talks about impact measurement, and we have to really think about it. Whether measurable or not measurable, I also feel that, we cannot let go of the knowledge building aspect of uh, feminist leadership building program. Like Ambedkar says, it does a dent. However, we also need to be really, really creative. We cannot just be very. Eventually, I think that allows us also to really, really think. Really, really, really push ourselves as practitioner to also think creatively. How do we what is happening that with what we are doing? I mean, it's a question worth pondering upon. So I would encourage everybody who have joined this conversation to think about that question and not sort of settle with uh, the idea that intangible uh, change, impacts are intangible to measure. However, I would also encourage and invite everybody to sort of engage with our Chingaari program, and also sort of once in life sort of engage in this kind of programs that are run by different organizations. Archana is here, Priya is here, with everybody to just experience the impact that we're talking is intangible. It can only be experienced. With that invitation, I close. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, my co-panelists. Yeah.
Thank you, Vidya. Thank you. Shalini.
So for me, actually, it is really important for me to work on this, not this feminist leadership program, because I really believe in taking an intersectional approach in all our work. And so once a woman or a girl or a elected women representative, if they build understanding around intersectional approach, I am sure whether as Birja said, I will be able to measure in 1 year or 2 year not, but I am 100% sure that they will be able to apply those lenses in wherever they goes. So we have seen EWRs taking the recognition of caste-based discrimination and doing something about that. It was not under the program period. After 4 5 years, we came to know about this case story. So at least, and everybody will be using at least in their personal life. So that is why I just feel that it is very important to continue investing in a feminist leadership program, our time, resources, and engagement at all levels.
Thank you. Shruti?
Yeah, so I think even for me, I think same word Vidya and Shalini have said till now, that being part of this process of a feminist leadership building program is is also kind of a process of self-learning, unlearning, and like Bija said, right, we would encourage everyone to kind of be a part of this, but also kind of experience. When we talk about kind of measurement, I think a lot of times, one, we forget kind of this learning processes that come with it. And I'm so glad that, that's something that we did touch upon. But also, a lot of times we forget in trying to measure all of this, a lot of the joy that comes along. And then we've seen in all of our participants' lives that they've experienced also through the program, right? Like for a lot of our participants, they wore a sari for the first time, right? This is a joy that they really experienced as part of the program. They traveled alone, they took a flight alone without any sort of male provisioning. They kind of, we had this night where they danced, they sang, right? These are all joys that kind of underpin a lot of this feminist leadership building work, which might not be able to measure, but it is something that is transformative for our participants as well as for us who run these programs. So it is very important to constantly kind of remind ourselves about that, and to recognize and also kind of partake in that joy too. So I think that is what that's the note of hope, and I would like to leave it on.
Thank you. Thank you. Archana?
Yeah, loved everything everyone said. Just adding one more bit is again saying the same thing, I guess, is to heavily invest in the rigor of the process leading to the leadership. So a lot of our M&E is so outcome focused. I think the journey is more important than the destination, and that journey itself will be determined of the destination. So let's think of an M&E which is more focused on the process and the pedagogies and the tools, rather than just trying to see what has come out of it, and which means also is to have time and patience. Can M&E, have more space for time and patience for these processes to lead to whatever that leads to, and to be able to see that in long term? Thank you.
Thank you. I think only a discussion on feminist leadership can bring in joy, patience, and an invitation to participate. So, thank you so much. And I think I just want to leave everyone with this question, whose evidence counts and what really counts as evidence. So when we think about evidence, we also have to think about that. What counts as evidence? I really, really appreciate everyone taking out the time to join this. And thank you so much, Archana, Shalini, Birja, and Shruti. And more power to us. And I hope we keep getting the money and the resources to keep doing this work rigorously. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone, for
thank
joining.
you. Bye.